Hello and welcome to the first building tutorial video. In this video, it's just going to be about the setup and getting the basics kind of outlined. For an idea of what we are looking to create, you can see here we've got our, I've got my test project here. I can come over here and we can hit tab, and we can choose from one of these parts. And I'm going to pick this base piece here, and we can place that down. We can place another one down, maybe put a corridor down. Snap that into place, and then you can see here is our base. And oh, I've got the gravity turned down so I could jump over stuff. You can see here we can enter our base, come out the other side, and then we can come here, we can save our base. And if we exit out of the game and go back in, then we load our base. You can see here is our base that we've just saved. So you can see that we've got saving and loading of the bases working too, and we've got quite a few different pieces that we can rotate and snap into place. So here's like a bit of an observatory piece. So yeah, if you want these FBX files of these base parts, they are going to be available for free over on my Patreon. You'll find a link in the description below for those, so you can download them and follow along. And if you are a paid supporter on the Patreon, you will of course get access to all of the actual project files and all of the scripts that we create together as well. So let's just get stuck straight into this. So I'm going to create a new project. I am using Unity Hub 3.2. We're going to build this in 2021.3.7 LTS. And to get started, I'm going to use the first person core project. That'll give us a good controller to start with, and we can read more about this here. So it's a pre-configured character controller for first person. It uses the universal render pipeline, and it comes with a range of packages pre-downloaded, such as Cinemachine, the new input system, render pipeline, TextMesh Pro, etc. I'm going to choose a location for this. I'm going to go to my F drive, Unity projects, and let's place it in here. And I'm going to call this the build tutorial series. And I'm just going to create a project. Okay, so here we are in the project. You can see there is a README in the file if you want to learn a bit more about the first person template. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the README, starter asset PDF, the license, tutorial info, and mobile, and we'll just hit delete. We don't need them. And we'll let this reload, and then I'm going to go over to my preferred layout, which on my 4K screen is having the hierarchy down here and the console down here. That gives us a lot more space to work with in the actual main view here. So in this video, we're just going to be creating a buildtool.cs script. This will be the build tool that we use to interact with the world and actually put the logic onto for building stuff. And by the end of this video, we are going to just have some cubes spawning in the world. So let's create a folder to keep organized. So I'm going to create a folder, and we'll call this build system scripts. And then in here, we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call it build tool. And we'll open this up. I'm using Rider as my IDE. You'll probably be using Visual Studio, that's fine. And let's zoom in here so we can see all of this. Okay, so let's create the variables for our raycast that we're going to do to decide where we're actually going to place stuff in the world. So I'm going to make a serialized field. I'll do a private float, which I'm going to call underscore ray distance. I'm going to have a serialized field private layer mask, and we'll call this the build mode layer mask. And I'm just going to duplicate this, and we'll call this the delete mode layer mask, which we'll use when we are building and deleting objects from the world. And then we'll want a serialized field, private int, and we'll call this default layer int. And this is going to be later on when we are spawning buildings into the world. We can assign which layer we want them to be on for the physics interaction. And I'm just going to default this to 8, but we'll be able to change it in the inspector. And then we also need a serialized field, private transform, and call this ray origin. And then when we are building or deleting something, before we place it down, you'll see that we had a different material showing. So we want to have a reference to those materials. So I'm going to do a serialized field, private material. I'm going to call this building mat positive and building mat negative. Okay, so we're going to be able to edit all these in the inspectors, and then we're going to need some other private variables that we don't need to kind of edit in the inspector. I'm going to do private bool and call this delete mode, and this is just going to let us flag whether we are wanting to place an object or delete an existing object in the world. We then need a reference to our camera because we're going to be using it a lot, so we may as well cache it in start, so we can say for camera, and we can do that in our start method. So void start camera equals camera.main, and with all of that done, we can start working on our update method. So here we want to do a raycast into the world and get the position that we're looking at in the world, and then we can position our spawned object at that location. And we're going to do that by creating a new ray, which will start at our ray origin position and then going in the direction of our camera's forward direction. And then we can see if anything hits the layer mask we have chosen. If it is, we can position the building preview by setting its position to that. But for now, we'll set it to the direct position, and later we'll get it so the position snaps to a grid. So I'm going to wrap that logic in a method that's going to return a bool. And we can say is ray hitting something, and this is going to take in layer mask for this layer mask, and it's going to pass back out a ray cast hit, which hit info. So like I said, we'll construct a new ray, so I'm going to say var ray and set this equal to a new ray, and it's going to start at our ray origin dot position. The direction it's going to go is our camera dot transform dot forward times by the ray distance, which is what we're going to set in the inspector. Then we can return physics dot raycast, and we pass in the ray just created, the hit info out parameter, the ray distance, and the layer mask passed in. Here we need to say out hit info. So this will tell us if we are hitting something at the given layer mask, and it's going to pass back out the thing that we are hitting. And if it is hitting something, then we'll be able to position our building preview by setting the position, as I said, and eventually we will snap it to a grid. And then eventually, when we're happy with our position, we can press the left mouse button to actually place the object. So just to test this is all working, I'm going to say private game object, and we can say game object to position. And this is just going to be a test variable. We'll change this later. But what we want to do is we can say if game object to position is null, then we just want to return. And if it isn't null, we can set so if it's null, or we are not hitting something, and this is on the build mode layer mask, do out ray cast hit info. So if we don't have an object to position and we're not hitting something, then we're just going to return out of our update function. But if we are hitting something, then we can say game object to position is equal to our hit info dot point. Sorry, game object dot transform dot position is equal to hit info dot point. We can say if mouse dot current dot left button dot was pressed this frame, then we're going to instantiate the game object to position at the hit info dot point. We can say hit info dot point, and we should do quaternion dot identity. So let's go back over to Unity and check this is working. So let's jump over here. We'll have to let that compile. Just going to create, delete those two red items, add back in a UI event system. Click replace it with system module, and I'm going to go over to our main camera. Into this, I'm going to right click 3D object. Into the camera, I'm going to create an empty, and I'm going to call this our build tool. I'm going to add our build tool script to this. I'm just going to position it somewhere out in front of our camera. I'm going to make a cube underneath it. I'm going to scale this down just so we've got a sort of visual representation. We can see that our build tool is there in this camera window. We can actually just put it down a bit. Down, have a look, back down a bit more. So there we go, that's our build tool. And then I'm going to add another empty to this. I'm going to position it out at the front of our build tool. So this is the ray origin position. So I think that will do. Call this the ray origin. And I've just restarted my editor to make the UI a bit bigger for the recording so people can see a little bit better what's going on. So I'm going to now go to our main camera, to the build tool, and we need to set this up. So for the ray origin, we can drag in this empty that we've made. And we're going to need to make some layer masks here so we can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the floor, make sure that we've got this floor mesh. I'm going to go to our layer here and I'm going to select ground as our default layer. And I'm going to select this bigger piece here, this big blue bit. And I'm going to set that to the ground as well. And we're going to go back over to our build tool. For our build mode layer mask, we're going to just select ground. For the ray distance, I'm going to set that to 12. So that'll be it'll shoot a ray 12 distance, 12 units out in front, which should be about 12 meters. And if not, it'll just place the kind of sky in front of us eventually. And then let's make a cube, 3D object cube. I'm going to position that 0, 0, 0, move forward. So again, this is just temporary. We're going to be spawning in our buildings through code, but on our build tool, we can drag this cube in to our, I haven't made it public, private, so we'll do public game object, and we'll go back over to Unity. Then we'll drag in our cube, our game object position. Now, if we hit play, that should theoretically work. So let's hit play. Okay, so you can see that is working. We are positioning our, something's going on with our character, but we can click the left button and spawn these cubes into the world. Okay, so that's working. We've got this weird bug where we are being pushed back, but we can click these, the left mouse button and place these blocks. The reason for this weird surfing issue is that we've got a collider on the cube of our build tool. If we disable that collider, you can see that we don't have that issue anymore. So we can click and we can spawn in our cubes. We'll need to make sure we do that not in play mode. We've got turned our box collider off. You can just delete the collider actually, but you can see now that we can spawn as many cubes into the world as we want. Okay, so now how about we try to be able to delete the cubes out of the world. So back in our update method, we're going to listen out for a key press, and I'm going to do the Q key. So we can say if keyboard.current.Q key was pressed to this frame, then we're going to set delete mode enabled to the opposite itself. So we say equals whatever the opposite is. So if it's true, it'll set it to false. If it's false, it will set it to true. And then depending on if delete mode is enabled or not, we're going to do some different logic. So I'm going to take this code, cut it, put it down here in a private void build mode logic function. Do the same, make a new private void, and we'll say delete logic. And then up here we can now say if delete mode is enabled, we will do the delete mode logic, else we will do our build mode logic. So again, we want to see if we are hitting something, if we're looking at something, and we want to see if we're looking at a building. And if we are, we want to delete that building from the world. So we can say if not is Ray hitting something, and we're going to pass in our delete mode layer mask, get a out raycast hit info. So if we're not hitting anything, we're just going to return. But if we are, we're going to listen out for the left mouse button. So we can say, again, so we can say if mouse.current.left button was pressed this frame, then we're going to delete, we're going to destroy our hit info.collider.gameObject. So now we'll need to do a bit of trickery in just a second, but I'm going to click this cube first. I'm going to add a new layer to it. I'm going to add a building layer mask on layer 10. We're going to set our cube to be of layer building. Select that there. Now back on our build tool, we can go over to our delete mode layer mask and choose building. We can place a few of these around. I'm going to go back to our build tool, and I'm just going to remove the reference to the cube that we are positioning. And then I'm going to come up to inspector here, and I'm going to swap over to debug mode so I can check this delete mode enabled toggle. So if I press play, oh, hang on, got a issue here. Okay, that's because of this OR check. So what we want to do is we can take out this hit info section. So we're saying if the game object to position is null, then we'll return. And we'll do separately if we are not hitting something, we'll return. And then if it eventually gets past this, then we know it's safe to use our game object to position. Let's go back over to Unity, and that should clear up this issue we're having here in the console. So if we hit play, instead of is null, I'm going to say equals null. Head back over to Unity and see if that's fixed it. Okay, so I've done equals null. And then, so you can see here we're in the world and we're pointing around. Let's head over to our build tool. You can see that we've got this delete mode enabled toggle. So if I press Q, you can see that's toggling off and on. Now it's really hard to see what we're pointing at, but if delete mode is enabled and we go over here and we're looking kind of at this cube and then we left click, see that we can now delete this object from the world. And if we untoggle delete mode, and then we set this cube to be, then if we set this cube that's left as our game object to position, and we go back, you can see that we are now positioning it, and we can spawn that in. And if we toggle back delete mode, deleting stuff. So I think that's a good groundwork for this video. I think that's a good place to leave this video. In the next video, we're going to be looking at changing the material of the placed objects, depending on if we can place them or not, or if we're trying to delete them. So we'll turn them red if we're looking at them and we want to delete them. And we'll also get the object placement snapping to a world grid that we can define. So that's going to be in the next video. If you want the project files, as I said, they're available over on Patreon, as is the full series of these videos. They're all recorded and uploaded and available over on patreon.com/danposs. But if you can't or just don't want to support on Patreon, perfectly fine. I'll be uploading the rest of this series kind of on a weekly basis going forward here on YouTube. And as I said, the free kind of models of the rooms that we'll be using, they are available over on Patreon. You don't have to support that. That'll be just a public post. So feel free to head over to the link in the description to grab those models so you can follow along. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. I'd just like to take a minute to thank my amazing patrons, without whom I would not be able to do these kind of long form sort of series. In the 10,000 XP tier, we have John Smart and Trey Briggs, and all of the wonderful 4,000 XP tier members are on screen now. Thanks again for your support.